If you're like me and you grew up going to school, watching videos of Chinese people driving around Beijing on their bicycles, you might think it's impossible that a Chinese passport could be more valuable than your American passport or your Canadian or Australian or German passport. And yet in some ways, I can make a case that a Chinese passport is better, particularly than an American passport. I'm going to tell you why, and more importantly, I'm going to tell you how you can bridge that gap to have a stronger passport. So someone recently sent me a comment about an article they read, and they said it's comparing the Chinese and American passports. And they said, while the Chinese passport affords entry to fewer countries visa-free, there was one point where the Chinese passport won. When war or conflict breaks out, consistently, the Americans will evacuate their embassy staff first before telling citizens to get out of the country on their own means. There have been a number of cases where people have been told that the country will not attempt any military rescue or evacuation. You're a U.S. citizen, you're on your own. China, on the other hand, has consistently kept its embassy staff there until everyone is safely evacuated, and there have been a number of occasions where the Chinese Navy is sent with its warships to evacuate its citizens. In one instance, some aid workers chose to stay, so the Chinese ambassador and a few members of staff even chose to stay behind after Beijing ordered for their evacuation. And so this speaks to a couple things. Let's go line by line through this. The Chinese passport does afford access to fewer places visa-free. The biggest place where Chinese people need a visa are the big legacy brand Western countries. So if they want to go to the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, they need a visa. Now, if you qualify for a visa, like in the US, it's a 10-year visa, one and done. They also need a visa to go to most countries in Western Europe. So the Schengen area covers most of those, the UK, etc. What you are seeing, though, is more countries making it easier, such as the US had, to get visas as a Chinese citizen. And you're seeing the so-called global south increasingly open up for the same reason that Turkey, which has a citizenship by investment program that some of our clients like, their passport has good access to the global south. Most countries in the world don't have the same kind of judgments about passport quality that the Western countries do. And so if you've got 1.4 billion people who increasingly have money to spend, what you're finding is more and more countries in the global south want those tourists to come. The president of Serbia said during COVID, China was the only one that was supporting them. Take that for what you will, but you will see Chinese tourists in Serbia. You'll sit at the Starbucks at the mall, and you will sit next to Chinese tourists who are going there. Now, obviously, if you're an affluent Chinese tourist, you can probably get a Schengen visa, and you can go to Greece, and you can go to Spain, and you can go to France. But what's interesting is, people go to places where they don't need visas. There's nonstop flights from Belgrade to places in China, for example. And so, hey, let's go and check out Belgrade, they say. And so what's interesting is more and more countries are opening up, not just to Chinese, but to any large country. That's one reason why I've told people, as part of a multi-citizenship strategy, Turkey's citizenship by investment isn't the worst thing to have, because you've got that visa-free access to the global south. Then you've just got to figure out how to go to Europe if you want to. So the Chinese passport has gotten better, but it is still, of course, not on par with an American or European passport. But what's interesting here is there's a big misconception. I remember years ago when I was finalizing my decision to give up my U.S. citizenship, one of the people I talked to, I was referred to him. He was like a tax lawyer, and he was probably 70 years old or so. And he said, well, I don't know if I would do it because, U.S. passport's always going to be the most respected for business. And I remember, Vietnam when they were the helicopters on the embassy. And that's the power of marketing. And what have I told you? The U.S. is a great marketing machine. Some of the best marketers in the world live in the U.S., and a lot of them have built up the reputation of the United States itself. The idea that, okay, we took some people off the embassy roof in a helicopter, they're not doing that anymore. I've told you my experience. I've told you clients and friends' experiences. They're in some foreign country, they lose a passport, they stub their toe, they're going to the hospital, they call the U.S. Embassy. Nobody answers the phone. And I've been with friends of mine from Georgia and Colombia, and to be fair, even like the UK, they call their embassy, they get immediately taken care of. I'm a citizen of a country, here in Malaysia, I signed up at one point to be on the embassy mailing list. There's something like 12 of us. And we get like, oh, it's one of our holidays. Happy holidays, everybody. We're getting together for a potluck. Everybody come on over. And I've never done it, but it's like, isn't that nice? Nobody's inviting you to a potluck from the U.S. Embassy, and they're also not helicoptering you off the top of the roof. And so what's interesting is, I've been going to China. I first went 17 years ago. I haven't been recently. But when I see and hear about Chinese citizens all around the world, what I see is they're becoming more nationalistic. They're becoming more proud. They're still big believers in having a backup plan, having a plan B. They want a residence permit somewhere else. They're not supposed to have second passports. Some of them do get second passports, and they just can't use that in China. But they believe in having a backup plan, and yet more Chinese are happy to stay in China. I'm not saying they want their money in China, and I'm not saying there still aren't plenty who'd like to move somewhere else. But we are seeing more nationalism from people in China saying, hey, you know what? I'm proud to be Chinese. This idea that everybody wants to get the hell out, I don't think is so much true anymore. And I've seen what I've gone a couple times to the Chinese embassy to get a visa or to do whatever else. I've seen the way they treat citizens, and it's a lot better than they treat U.S. citizens at the U.S. embassy, quite frankly. So the misconception is the U.S. is going to send the fleet for you. And by the way, even people watching our episodes here, people will comment, you're an idiot for getting rid of U.S. citizenship. What happens when you get stuck somewhere? Well, first of all, I'm a libertarian and I take on responsibility for myself. I don't want anyone's free health care. I'll pay for it myself. I don't want to be rescued anywhere. I will, we had a client years ago. He's like, I got kidnap insurance. I'm like, that's a thing? Okay, kidnap insurance, interesting. Like there's insurance policies for these things. You can cover for a lot of these things. I don't need someone to come and send the fleet. And by the way, what I've learned is you can travel to a heck of a lot of places in the world, and you'll feel pretty safe. Very, very few places in the world I've felt unsafe. I'm not perhaps going to go to an active war zone, but most other places I've generally felt safe. And so the idea that I would keep a U.S. passport with all the regulatory burden, with all the tax filings. Now, I legally paid zero tax most of the years that I was an expat outside of the U.S. holding their passport. So it's not the tax itself, but the filings and the F-bars and all that kind of stuff. To the lawyer's point, he's wrong now. The U.S. is no longer a respected passport for business around the world. Even back then in 2017, a lot of banks around the world didn't want Americans. A lot of investments around the world couldn't accept Americans. Crypto exchanges and crypto projects couldn't take on Americans or wouldn't. And now, look at some of the geopolitical and trade tensions. I think the U.S. will become an increasingly toxic passport for business. It already has, and it's probably only going to get worse. But if you're holding on to it for the idea of they're going to come and save me when times get tough, number one, where are you going where times are that tough? I go to Cambodia and Laos and Colombia and Uruguay and Paraguay, and I've been to Lesotho in South Africa and Africa. I've been to Egypt. I can't think of a place where I would need to be airlifted out. There's even places you can go in Yemen, Socotra Island. You'll probably be fine. So the truth is that smaller countries are more responsive. And that's important because you and I can't get Chinese citizenship. I think that's probably the one passport, maybe Indians up there too, but that's the one passport where you're just not going to get it. Maybe if you live in Hong Kong for 7 years, you can get their version of the Chinese passport. But for those of us who are not going to be Chinese, and by the way, they don't want dual citizens, so why would you want to be Chinese? But you want to have a smaller country in your portfolio. You want to have more responsive countries in your portfolio. Whether you want to keep your current passport or not, I won't judge you for that. Most of our clients who are Americans, they plan on keeping their U.S. passports, but they feel better having a second and possibly third passport in case they ever change their mind. They can change on a dime and they're ready to go. But in the meantime, whether they're American or any other nationality that we serve, Canadians, Brits, Germans, Brazilians, Vietnamese, they know that they have options. And I think what you want to optimize for is passports where the government cares about you. One of the combos that I've talked about over the years that anyone can qualify for is getting a Caribbean or similar citizenship by investment program. So St. Lucia, Antigua and Barbuda, any of the others. Now Nauru in the South Pacific is in the game. They're cheaper, so you can compare. I think the Caribbeans are a little bit, one step up, but Nauru is a substantial, discount. But something like that. And then you pair that with Turkey's citizenship program, where you're going to either buy real estate or put money in the bank. So you're making one donation to the citizenship by investment country on one of the islands, and then you're making some kind of investment that you could recoup in a number of years in Turkey. And so you have the neutrality and the small, helpful nature of, in the Caribbean's case, the Commonwealth countries, where you do potentially have access to some British embassy services in an emergency, as well as, Turkey and their heft, and that's a different kind of country. I think neutral and different are what you're looking for in your second passport portfolio, at least for one or two of them. And if you put those two together, you'd have great visa-free travel around the world, because the Caribbean countries are smaller, and so therefore they haven't gotten around perhaps to finalizing visa-free travel with, Tajikistan or Bolivia or Thailand. Whereas Turkey has. Turkey's a big country that has embassies all over the world. And so if you can't rely on a Commonwealth situation with the British embassy for the first passport, then Turkey has embassies. And so what I want you to focus on is finding a country that serves you. Turkey is obviously a big country. Citizenship by investment is not a big part of their mix. But a Caribbean country where their business is being in citizenship by investment, and that's a substantial part of their budget, they want to serve you. And again, they don't have that many embassies, but find other countries that offer either a citizenship program or some kind of tax incentive for foreigners. You want to look at cultural criteria of countries where they serve you. I have, citizenship in a handful of small countries that aren't islands. And when I go to renew my passport, it takes a day. And you know what? It's not a laborious process. Going to the embassy, for example, much more pleasant than going to a US embassy. So my strategy for building a passport portfolio of countries that actually serve you, number one, visa-free travel should be considered on par with how much you have now. Getting visas to places like the aforementioned, Paraguay or Thailand is not difficult, because those countries also, they want you to be there, right? This is all about talking about how to have citizenships and how to go to places where you're wanted, you're welcomed, go where you're treated best. That's our 5 magic words. But if you're used to having an American or a Canadian or an Australian passport, and you're starting to see the writing on the wall that they don't care about you, they don't want to serve you, they almost kind of resent that you're an expat, they don't want to help you, sure, get a passport with good visa-free travel. Cyprus used to have a citizenship program. Obviously, any other smaller European state, if you can get citizenship by descent. I've seen Slovakia, for example. I've heard some good stories from their embassies. You can get Slovak citizenship by descent if you have ancestors from there. I will tell you that, the European Union member states have done more to save their citizens than the US has. Look at during COVID. Look at how they left people out to hang. Look at Australia. They wouldn't even let you come back to the country. These are not the kinds of responsive countries that you want. You want countries that serve you. And I think the ones that have lower taxes, I've often found, have a kind of a low bureaucracy attitude. Georgia is a country that I've told you about for a long, long time. They've got, a very responsive public service hall. Whether it's getting a residence permit, whether it's applying for citizenship, renewing a passport, buying a property, it is responsive. There's a culture where they said, and yes, there is a new government than the one that put this stuff in place, but they've kept, the system that is pretty low bureaucracy, pretty functional. Give the people what they want. Get it to them fast. Get it to them for a low price. In the countries that we talk about here, there's a much more of a vibe of the government is there to serve you. And I think that a lot of people, particularly in the US where I'm from, have this Stockholm syndrome that if our government treats us like crap and the TSA harasses us and the US embassy barks at you, some of that's the case everywhere. No, it's not the case everywhere. The best experience I ever had at a US embassy was renouncing my citizenship. They were delightfully professional and kind. The rest of the time, you want to renew a passport? Oh, it was dreadful. So, possible options. We talked about the Turkey plus island citizenship by investment combo. You get diplomatic representation from a moderately service-oriented country like Turkey. They do seem to have it a bit more organized in some places. Plus, you have the neutrality of the Caribbean. You could also go get a smaller country citizenship by descent. You could also move to a smaller country where you get the service by living there and then you become naturalized. A lot of people who want a plan B aren't going to move somewhere else. So this is the kind of thing that we're helping our clients figure out. You can go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply and learn how we can help you. If you have $1 million or more in liquid assets, or if you have $500,000 a year in income from a business or trading, that qualifies to be our client. The sweet spot's $5 to $100 million. Those are the people that we've really served the best. You deserve to be treated better, and you deserve to go where you're treated best. And again, a lot of our clients are not giving up their main birth citizenship. I did. I feel better doing it. I think that the more citizenships you have, and the more you engage with them, and the more you travel on them, the more you live overseas, the more you're going to say, "What do I need this U.S. passport for?" Or "What do I need this French passport for? They're threatening to tax me." Or "What do I need this Canadian passport for?" Or "Australian? Look at how they treated me. Why do I want to be a citizen of a country that treats its own citizens like that?" And you think, "Oh, it's the same everywhere else." No, it's actually not. It really, really is not, especially when you engage in countries where there's a business transaction. Please, we need your tax dollars. Please, we'll give you citizenship if you invest. Those are the kind of places that you want to go. And so somehow China has figured that out from a service point of view for their citizens better. You and I are not going to be Chinese, but you can find other places that give you that. They may not send the fleet, but let's be honest, how many of us, even me going to some pretty far-flung places, how many of us need the fleet sent to get us out? What you want is the spirit of service where we actually care about our citizens. We don't leave them behind while we take our afternoon tea service in the chopper and head back home.